Hello YouTube. Thought I'd show this is De-bodgery. I thought I'd show how this whole quill assembly goes together. So I've got things more or less taken apart. I've got a little tiny problem, which I thought I did as soon as I pulled the bearings out of the packaging, but I'll talk about that in a second. Alright, so essentially every quill assembly I've ever seen on a drill press works pretty much the same. Okay, you have the outer piece, and it's got this rack on it that engages the arm assembly. You'll have a slot in there, and I use that for my quill lock. And on bigger drill presses, you'll also have this slot in it so you can put a wedge in there to drive things out of the taper. Alright, so what we've got here to assemble this thing is, off the top of the spline, it's got some threads right here. And this is a castle nut. And this little washer right here, it's got, well, there we go. It's got the little inner tab in it, and that just catches inside one of the splines, and then this washer goes underneath it. So you basically, put all this together, and then tighten that castle nut up until you've pulled everything together without binding it up, and then you take one of these outer tabs here and you bend it up into one of the slots in the castle nut, and that's what keeps all the stuff from coming undone again later. On my Craftsman drill press, it had nothing like that. It just had a round spot here, and there was a collar with a single set screw in it that held all this assembly in place. Because otherwise, without that set screw, things would slowly migrate south, which created its own problems. And like if I ever pulled anything out of the taper, that set screw wasn't enough to hold everything together. It was basically there just to keep this inner shaft section in place, and that's about it. All right. Of course, down on this end, you have the taper right about here. Yeah, there it is. There's a little shoulder, so this section right here is a little bit larger diameter than all this part. And that's so that this ID of the bearing has a place to land and then slide easily across that section. All right, so on the far end, essentially what I had to do here was take that all apart and then tap on the end of the spline section, and then the whole shaft will drive out this way. Once that was loose, then I used a rod. This is just a steel rod scrap out of some old printer or whatever that was long enough to fit up inside here, and then start tapping in a circle around the inside of the bearings until they slowly dropped out. That's top and bottom. And just use a hammer to do that. You don't have to hit very hard because they will come loose. If you don't hear kind of like a hollow tapping sound, then they're not moving. And maybe you're not hitting where you need to hit. That's a possibility. But yeah, these came out with pretty little difficulty, about what I expected. I've had much harder things come out, but yeah. So on this bottom end down here, this is a thrust bearing because you're applying a lot of upward forces on a drill press. Duh. And so there was a bearing race on top, a bearing race on the bottom, and then these roller balls in between, and they do compression forces super well. And then of course this bearing, it's a deep groove bearing, but they don't do lateral loads at all. They're meant to do radial loads. So yeah, you want the thrust bearing in there. The Craftsman did not have a thrust bearing in it, which was kind of stupid. It only had these bearings. Considering that it was a much lighter duty drill press, I suppose that's not very surprising. All right, when I took this bearing out, I thought this was kind of interesting. I've washed it all up. It's fairly clean now. All the grease has gone off of it. But that right there, got a little magnet down here, but all of that stuff right there, that's metal that came out of that bearing. It was kind of crunchy before, and I'll look over the balls to make sure that they're not like pitted or something. But they're shiny and they look clean, and I'll look them over with a magnifying glass to be sure. But I don't think I need to replace this thrust bearing. I think it's okay. Now that I've washed all the crap out of it, and that's probably just from years of use. Or the other possibility is, because I've run across this enough times, is that things are machined and they're not washed out, they're not cleaned up, which is kind of stupid for a bearing. And then they've got little metal bits in them, like the drill chuck that I put on the drill, that had lots of metal bits in it. And I think I put that in another video, but yeah, that's definitely not going to do any good. A little pile of metal filings up inside the bearings. But yeah, I just thought I'd show you guys how this all went together. Oh, I guess I didn't mention this one bearing. So this bearing right here is clearly the same size as that one, so that's cool. This here was supposed to be a 6206 like this one is, but it's a 6203. I'm not sure if I ordered wrong or if Amazon sent the wrong bearing, or the seller did. But anyway, whichever the case is, don't have the bottom bearing yet. And the only way to get that bad boy in there is to take everything apart to get to it. So there's no way this quill assembly is going back together again until I get the correct bearing. This bearing feels okay-ish. I mean, it's pretty smooth. This top bearing, however, this one definitely feels crunchy. I don't know how well it comes across on camera, but yeah, this bearing definitely feels crunchy. So yeah, it's what I expected before. I put it in a video before that I thought my top bearing was bad, and I would have to say that this is definitely rough inside. So anyway, YouTube, enjoy, stay healthy, keep away from that damn virus, and I'll talk to you later.